happened today. You're right. It's almost the end of.
This is Chairman Mike McCoo, Wellington Board of Finance, calling to order the special budget meeting of Thursday, March 4th, 2021 at 7 p.m. And we have regular members and both alternates present with the exception of Christina, who is coming out of another meeting running late. She's requested Lisa, unless that's her coming in right now. She's requested that Lisa be seated for her if she was late. So if I can get a motion to that effect, please.
So moved.
Okay, can I get a second? All right, I'll second that. All those in favor of seating Lisa for Christina? Can you do the vote, Marissa?
Yep. Steph,
Aye.
Pete,
Aye.
Matt,
Yes.
sorry, Jeff,
Yes.
Mike.
Yes. Okay, on to approval of minutes. We have minutes for the February 25th. Am I doing? Yes, I wrote that right. Meeting. I did review them. Our minutes are obviously pretty long these days for these meetings. I didn't find anything myself, so I'll make a motion that they be accepted.
I'll second.
All right, discussion on that. Any additions or corrections? Okay, Marissa?
Pete,
Yes.
Jeff,
Yes.
Steph, Annie.
Jane. Or did you say Steph?
No, I did.
I'm sorry.
Lisa,
Yes.
Matt,
Abstain.
Mike.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, we're on to present to speak. Public participation is desired and encouraged. Speakers will be limited to time and appropriateness of comments to maintain progress, stay on topic, and maintain. Anyone who has a video camera would like to be recognized for present to speak, please wave your hand. We'll call on you first. I'm seeing none so far. Anybody else who is participating tonight? If you would like to speak. All right, Peter, go ahead.
Peter Lachenchich, 97 Trask Road. Good evening to everyone. And I just want to touch base on process. From what I understand from Erica earlier, we're nearing the end of the executive order, and I'm wanting to understand if when we reach the point in the budget process where we will have the public hearing and the first exposure to the town on the budget, if that will be in person. Is that working with the calendar? I think that's important, and any feedback we can have now so that the townspeople can finally come again and see where we are and what we're doing and the good work you folks are doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Other present to speak. If you are not on video and you'd like to unmute and call out your name, we'll call on you. Okay, I'm not seeing or hearing any more there. Let's move on to old business. Item 1, questions from February 25th, 2021 meeting. There were a couple of questions that came up from the meeting and how we were handling alternates. I did send information to the board members in advance of this meeting, looking into that more. I think it was good that some questions were asked so that we could ascertain if we're following the right process. So item A was, should the seating of alternates be rotated or based on request of the absent member? As I conveyed to the board members, in the Connecticut General Statutes, it says a regular member who's going to be absent may request the alternate to be seated in their place. That's right in Connecticut General Statutes.
Mike,
Yes,
I believe the statute reads shall request an alternate to be placed.
I'm sorry, shall request. Yes, and obviously sometimes they are unable because it's an unexpected absence, but if they are knowing, I believe that is correct. And I have too many screens here. I don't have that language right in front of me. Regardless, I believe the result of that is that the process we were using and have been using, to the question of should we rotate, I think we have traditionally rotated when there is not a request. I think it's fair that we continue that process as a further step beyond the request if there is not a request. So other board members, discussion on this, item 1A? All right, let's move to item 1B. Should the seated alternate remain or be removed once the regular meeting arrives? The Connecticut General Statutes does not speak to this particularly, and Robert's Rules of Orders also does not speak to it. If you refer to the materials I sent to the board members from the town clerk, it appears that this is the traditional process and that it is there is a lot of information out in the world of how meetings are handled that is consistent with that. That essentially the alternate's job is to be in place of a regular member when the regular member is not available. However, there's a caveat to that that says that you shouldn't remove an alternate when you're right in the middle of something involved or detailed that the alternate's been participating in. So I think we'll just have to try to make sure that we're handling that appropriately. Clearly, there's not a line in the sand, so we'll just have to handle that appropriately. When a regular member returns to the meeting, as long as we're not in the depths of something, then it transfers over to the regular member. And certainly we can all be participants in making sure we're doing that the right way. Questions on that item 1B? Lisa.
What if the alternate wishes to step out and put the main member back in?
I think that could be discussed at that point, and I think
Okay,
probably be fine.
okay,
I think the reason the rules seem to be written that way, or the standard of the industry, I'll say, not the rules, is to allow someone who's participated in detail in a particular discussion, like if you're about to vote on a motion that was complex or in depth, you would allow that person to finish out their participation. But I don't,
okay.
if the seated alternate is saying, I'm ready to bow out and let the regular member come back in, I don't see a problem with that either.
And vote. Let the regular member come back in and vote.
Right.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
And that also brought up some interesting information too about the participation of alternates when they are not seated, which was something I had not experienced, had not researched, and didn't know. But the case law in Connecticut seems to be fairly clear on a point. Of course, how you define that point is not clear, but they're clear on the point that an alternate member who is not seated should not participate in a manner that is essentially drastically affecting the direction the discussion is going, or I forget the terminology that was used, but basically the alternate should be able to participate, but in a manner that is not promoting strongly a particular thought, because then they're essentially acting as another member of the board.
Mhm.
And you actually could create even a violation of minority representation if you have a alternate strongly participating and potentially swaying the conversation. They're essentially operating as if they are a regular member of the board, except that they can't vote. And so that is apparently the reasoning behind that. And there was a court case referenced in Connecticut about that. Any questions on that before I move on, or discussion? Lisa?
Yeah, I would agree with that. Especially from me, right? So, but if I have a question, because I truly am not clear on something, would that be considered, that should be educational, right? Because all the board members may be, some of my questions may help everybody else, right? As long as I'm not, and I certainly know the difference. Swaying.
That's my belief. Anyone who is a member, and obviously, for example, Erica is in a position where she's not a voting member of this board, but she's a member ex officio. She participates in discussions sometimes that is, asks a question that helps us maybe illuminate facts for the debate. I think the difference is if the alternate member is not seated and they're really promoting a certain vote
Yeah.
or direction, that's what this case law is talking about.
Got it. I agree with that.
All right, any other questions? Okay, then old business item 2, clarification of point of order question. At the end of the meeting, Matt asked a point of order question. And I wanted to clarify, hang on, I'm gonna try to change my screen for a second here. So I looked up to be sure how to handle point of order or what point of order is. And so basically multiple different definitions indicate a point of order is an announcement that the rules are not being followed. Or in parliamentary procedure, a point of order occurs when someone draws attention to a rules violation. So in the case of the meeting last week, that's probably sort of a general use of the term point of order. It wasn't really a point of order. It was a question about how to communicate things that were not on the agenda. And so I guess because it's not a regular meeting, we can't add items to the agenda. So I guess that was really more a question than a point of order. But either way, it's resolved. There was no breach in the rules or in the order.
I just wanted to ask a question, so I didn't know how else to ask permission to ask a question, so.
Feel free to raise your hand or call my name and ask a question. I'll always try to answer it. And so, any other questions on item 2? All right, new business, budget discussion. General comment for the board members, just a reminder, I'm sure you know, but this is our last meeting with presentations. We were behind the 8 ball with Board of Ed because the members did not get it until right before the meeting. So I'm sure that that's meant people have needed to spend time since the presentation to come up with more questions. And so with tonight being our last night of presentations, I'd like to encourage every board member to get questions to me as soon as you can in email, so that if we need to ask a budget submitting agency to come back and answer questions, to be at the deliberations next week or whatever, we need time to collect that question, send it to those people and give them a moment to respond. And I think we can sometimes get very valuable information to help us make budget decisions when we have a chance to ask some questions. So I'm just encouraging everyone to come up with the questions about the things you want to know before we make decisions, and get them back to me as soon as is reasonably possible so we can ask those questions. So moving on, Erica, would you like us to do CIP first? Does that make more sense?
I think that might make sense, so that when I present my budget and those dollars are in the budget, it might make sense that you've heard the presentation of the plan.
Okay, Stuart, are you ready to spin up? Or are you doing it, Erica?
I think Stuart is. Stuart, would you like me to share the plan on screen?
Yes, please.
Marissa, it says screen sharing is disabled.
Oh, hang on.
Or Mike, sorry.
Let me add you in here.
I think you're all set.
Thank you.
Okay. you go.
So some of you have participated in the process this year and or previous years. May be familiar with this spreadsheet masterpiece that Donna maintains for us as meetings go on. She keeps it updated. Do people need an explanation of the format of this, or are they all set?
Stuart, I think maybe if you could just sort of highlight it, especially because we have newer members, like we have Brenda, she's very new.
Okay,
to this.
that's fine.
So if you could just sort of kind of skim over it, which will allow enough background that people can then ask questions.
So generally speaking, CIP projects are greater than $10,000. And many times much more than that. The spreadsheet represents 5 years of planning based on request from the department heads. So the Board of Selectmen, present things that they need, Public Works, the fire departments, Parks and Rec, occasionally the senior citizens and library, and the Conservation Commission. And if I left anybody out, feel free to correct me. On the top of the spreadsheet, down to, I think, line 18 probably, or 16. Those are things that are already committed from previous years. So starting at the top, you get the bond for the library. The next one is a fire truck. Then there's a backhoe and mower for Public Works, the animal control officer, and so on and so on. So those are already committed on some sort of either a bond or a lease, or typically what you see there. Historically, in least recent decade or more, the vehicles are leased anywhere from usually 5 to 7 years in terms, and the interest rate goes up and down from there. So that's what we're already on the hook for. Underneath that are some estimates of, in terms of things that would be leased, probably leased, or a bond of what's in the plan. So you'll see some Wellington Hill SCBA air packs, replace another truck for Public Works, and then a bond on the guesstimation of something to do with either a new school, or the numbers will change for renovation, or none of the above. There's some road repairs that have been standing around for decades that we never seem to get the money for. So one thought was in the out years to do a bond to encompass any of those big projects that are coming up. Any questions so far?
So 16 through 26 are items that have been approved by the CIP committee. Is that true?
The ones on the top were approved in previous years, and the town has committed to
That's 1
paying
through
for those.
16, right?
Yes.
The ones below line 36 are the individual projects that have been requested this year, or presented to the committee, and they may be funded in years 1 through 5. And that's a large part of what the CIP committee does, is to prioritize these as best we can. Many projects are pushed out a year or more years away. You can't do everything in 1 year. And there's been a historical dollar amount set aside for CIP projects over the last probably 20 years, and it's crept up some, but not a lot. So we try to stick with roughly that figure when we can, and fund what projects we can in year 1, and then start to distribute the rest of them out in years 2 through 5. The other part of the is not only the dollar amount, but where is the money coming from? And two columns to the right of the dollar amount. In fact, if you look at line 36, the CES fire panel, that's the Center Elementary School. And in the second set of columns over, it's the price estimation, and that was $41,500. And 930 talks about the account that the money comes from. The different revenue sources are, some are big, some are little. The local funds is one of them. That's taxpayer money. Another one is capital reserve, which is some savings we've set aside for capital projects from previous years. And that, in theory, evens out some of the ups and downs. That some year you might not be able to hit that dollar amount and you have to go over it. You can pull some more from capital reserve as long as there's some money set aside in your capital reserve savings to do that. Also, each year we try to put something into capital reserve. The idea is to put something into savings. So if something big came up a year or two from now, you could absorb that increase instead of going directly to the taxpayer that current year for that dollar amount. Some of the other funds are LOSIP, which is a state fund that's passed down. We're expecting $57,859 to come in from now to whatever, how far ahead your crystal ball goes. It is dependent on the state. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down. It can go away. And there are rules set aside for LOSIP, primarily no vehicles and no schools. So there are some projects that fit that criteria, and we try to charge that to the LOSIP fund. And it is a fund, so we can carry that over if need be, but we don't want to leave a whole lot of money in there, so the state probably figures you don't need it. There's also Fund 17. The income for Fund 17 is based off the ambulance billing revenue. So when the fire department transports somebody to the hospital and they get some money, which could be anywhere from $99 to $1,000, you never know what you're going to get. That goes into Fund 17. And typically Fund 17 is used for emergency services equipment, be it trucks or breathing apparatus or whatever can come out of that. Now I think the highest gross revenue I've seen in that is about $225,000 a year. But out of that, we pay for paramedic services, we pay the billing company. Board of Finance usually takes $10,000, puts it towards the payroll side of things. And so we have a pretty solid guess that we'll make at least $145,000 into the fund for the year. And so if they're buying a truck and it's on a 7-year lease, and if that fund can support it for emergency services, then we typically try to use Fund 17. So that's kind of so there are a few others. One are you'll see out in the out years some bond anticipation notes and bonds. And borrowing money on a bond is while the interest rate is generally pretty good, there are significant fees to go along with that. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the last and only bond we have going right now is for the library. So you kind of save those for the big things, because the fees to get the bonds started are in the tens of thousands of dollars. I think closer probably to 40,000 was the last figure I heard. So each department head submits a bunch of requests, and we go through them, and some stay, some rarely do we take them completely off the plan, but sometimes it happens. Or we push it to the out years, saying, well, we can't afford it this year. There's other things that have higher priority, and we'll look again next year, and hopefully we can afford it that year. Of course, then you don't know what other new requests will be coming in the following year. One of the big situations we have townwide is the school building committee. That there's certainly, as I understand, their charge is looking at the evaluation of Some of the options that have been proposed in the past were to renovate one school and put all the kids into that one, or renovate both schools. And these are in the, generally speaking, the tens of millions of dollars to do that. And we don't know what, if anything's going to happen. It's ultimately up to the taxpayers to decide of, do they support that project and the cost associated with that. So you'll see out in year 5, there's actually a plan A and a plan B. One is to, and doesn't even involve renovating the school, it's simply catching up with their deferred maintenance. At this stage of the game, we're trying not to put a lot of money into these buildings, not knowing if you're not going to be in the building in 5 years or whatever the time frame may be. But there is a minimum that they have to do to, stay open for now. So there's, I think, about 1.2 million just in deferred maintenance in year 5 on one of the plans. The other one is to not do that maintenance and buy a new school. So that's where year 5, and year 5, it could be year 4 or 3, depending on how fast the process goes with the school building committee. And then, of course, what the impact to the taxpayer would be for any of those options.
Stuart, may I make a comment?
Yes.
One thing that's critical for board members to remember is that the CIP committee approves this as really sort of there are two main thrusts to what's being approved. One is the 5-year plan, which is a well thought out, well considered, often argued about plan for 5 years. But because you're only committing funding for the next year, the next fiscal year, just as all the rest of the things this board approves is for the next fiscal year, the committee knows that year 1 of the plan is the really critical piece. And it's not that they don't put good effort into the other 4 years, but year 1 is the key piece right here. Prioritizing, figuring out how much money makes sense to spend and all of that. So a lot of focus is in year 1, which in this case on the screen right now is the lighter blue column and the next 3 white columns there. So the ones, yeah, exactly where the mouse is moving around right now. Those columns are the year 1, and those are the financial commitments that this budget, when we're done with it and the taxpayers approve it, those are the financial commitments or expectations that would be in the public approval process. Years 2 through 5 will get debated again next year as the new 1 through 4, and then the 5th year. So it's important as a planning tool, but it's year 1 that we're committing to for money.
So can we, after we're done with this part of it, can we go through year 1 a little bit? Scroll all the way down and.
Yeah, I can mention each of the individual projects. These are as requested by the department head. So we didn't make these up, but these are, the department heads came to us, said these are the most important things. So line 36 is the center school fire panel. And if you want exact details, contact the department head as to why they requested it, but I'll try to explain it as it was presented to us. The fire panels in both schools were put in approximately 22 years ago. They don't feel there's any spare parts available. And if something breaks in that fire alarm, one, they have to collectively, the town would have to come up with some money to replace it in the middle of the year, which is always tough to do. And the other would be the impact to operations in the schools of not having a active fire alarm in the building. So between line 36 and line 66, it's about $104,000 for 2 fire panels. And the superintendent has said that is his highest priority in CIP requests, is to get those 2 panels replaced. In terms of cash layout, you can't lease them. LOSIP won't pay for them. So that's simply a cash hit to the fund to pay for those panels. So those are significant. Moving down to line 45 is to chip seal the parking lot at Center School. That the thought there is to try to chip seal it and preserve it instead of letting it break up into lots of pieces and have to strip it and repave it in the future. We already talked about line 66, which is the Hall School fire panel. The line 70, Hall School paint the library.
What's, if I can interrupt, I'm
Oh
sorry.
yeah, go ahead.
So I got 57, so we're planning on expending $20,000 on AC for the band room? Or we're not?
No, that's in the out years. So that'd be in year 2 for doing
I
the
see.
AC
Okay.
band room. So we're only dealing with those
I got
columns
it.
right there in the middle.
Thank you.
For this point, I mean, obviously the rest of the stuff is in the plan as well, but we're going over year 1 right now.
Got it.
So the library at Hall School, it had some water damage based on when the roof was leaking off and on. And now that hopefully the roof project is coming to fruition, when that's done, they want to paint and repair the ceiling of the library at Hall School. Line 74 is the gym floor resurfacing. It's something that needs to be done periodically. I don't know the exact process, but I think they strip it and sand it and shim it and make sure it's an appropriate floor and then reseal everything. I know it's been done in past years and it's part of the ongoing maintenance for that system. Line 77 is replacing a heating unit for the stage area. So that's one of the things they didn't want to do.
Stuart, let me, if I could just interrupt for a
Yep.
second to point out also the stage is not just a stage. The stage is also used as a classroom. When they open the folding wall, it's a stage. When they close the folding wall, it's classroom. So that heating unit provides heat for the stage, classroom, and I believe the music room next to it also. And that heating unit, I think, is completely out of service now, as I understand it.
Line 78 and 79, here's the second more significant thing along with the fire panels, is funding for the school building committee to hire a consultant to lead them through this process of what to do with the schools. Again, is it a new school? Is it a major renovation for one or both schools and that sort of thing? If the school project comes to fruition in the future, correct me if I'm wrong, there'll be reimbursement from the state for this at 55.36%. So the reimbursement part would be in the future, but for now we have to lay out the $100,000. Doesn't mean they're going to spend it all the first year, because they obviously have to hire somebody and work out a price and what the terms and conditions of that is over the whatever time frame they're looking at. But those are the two things that are unusual: the fire panels and the $100,000 for the school building committee. Without the money for the school building committee, in essence, they can't do their job of evaluating all these different projects or potential projects.
So on line, I guess 79, that's the reimbursement, the 55,000.
That's right.
Does that happen in the same year that the money's expended, or does it happen in the succeeding year?
No, I believe it only comes back if you execute into a school project, be it the building a new school or a major renovation.
Then we shouldn't have the minus 55,000 on this line. It's not, there's no assurance that that's going to happen.
That's correct. This is the best guess, and I'll leave it to Mike or Donna or Erica in terms of how you handle that potential reimbursement that's coming back in. It's just the appropriate place to put it.
You just make a note that there's a $55,000 reimbursement expected, but it shouldn't be reflected in the total.
So I believe this is how it's been done in the past, and I don't think we should change the CIP process on the fly here. The CIP is a different committee, but I think we should follow up on this afterwards.
Does this, when we approve this budget, will it include minus $55,000?
These
No.
are off budget dollars, Matt. So that middle column is off budget dollars. The first white column are dollars that you'll see in the selectmen's budget in the next presentation. So it's our best adjustment at what the outcome will be. And so it's represented there, but I mean, they're real dollars, but unless there's a project or a construction grant of some sort, then there wouldn't be reimbursement. But it won't affect taxpayer expenditures for this current fiscal year.
The Fund 04 that's there is the general reserve. So basically it's coming out of savings that are already set aside. And then if and when that 55 comes back, it would go back in that way. Any other questions so far? Line 88 is hopefully fixes a long-term problem that the schools have had. They have radio communications with the buses, but just like Public Works, you can't talk from one side of town to the other, especially from Hall School, because where Hall School is located down in the valley, it doesn't reach up and over. The proposal here is to buy some radios that are compatible with the state of Connecticut radio system. They're allowing municipalities to use it. And this is what we did with the Public Works Department about 2 years ago. And they have great coverage. We loaned some radios to the superintendent who tested them out, and he reports, generally very good coverage and would allow them to talk between the schools and the buses. So that's what's doing in there. Where we go? Let's see. Line 90, which is the town office building concrete floor, which is hoping to get rid of some of that dirt floor in there and bring it up to a current century of some sort, as opposed to in the past. There's a dirt floor in there now, and they've had some ongoing damage with things being stored there, as well as the basement being very wet. So they're hoping that's going to fix that. Line 91 is for the town office building audio visual equipment. I believe this continues on some equipment that they've already bought and in an effort to keep an online presence and recording for meetings in the future, kind of thing. Line 92 is the town office building security and fire system monitoring. And that does not include just the town office building. It includes many of the municipal buildings for their security systems as well. The current vendor that has been monitoring alarms is stopped doing so very shortly, forcing us to go to an outside vendor or another vendor. And there's some equipment upgrades that need to be made to facilitate that connection. So for roughly speaking, a half dozen alarms, that's the cost of getting that up and running.
I'm sorry, can we go back to town office building audio video?
Erica, do you want to speak on that one?
Sure. With some coronavirus funds afforded to the town, we purchased some equipment so that we could begin to have hybrid meetings if we need to have a hybrid town meeting. And this so that was all funded with coronavirus funds. This would be the remainder of that, so that moving forward, we've made our meetings incredibly accessible to folks who can't be in the room. And so moving forward, this will allow us to do that. So our hope is to continue to be able to record our meetings and or live stream them so that people can participate from home. It's very 21st century. I think it's important that we increase our access to public meetings, and this will allow us to do so.
How much did we spend already on audio video equipment?
I don't have that number in front of me. I believe it was about $17,000.
And because it's in the center column, it's not direct from taxation.
This is using LoCIP dollars.
So it's the O2 indicates it's from that pot of money the state is giving us.
And my hope is that if we get some further coronavirus funding and we're able to do some things, that those might be things that would qualify as a result of COVID and being able to make our meetings accessible. So if we can find a way to do it with other grant funds, we will.
All right. Moving right along, line 94 is the town office building flooring replacement. I believe this is limited to the land use department, that the tiles and such are falling off and making it an unsafe condition for the flooring. So that's the cost, estimated cost to do that project. The next three line items are vehicles for public works. The LE stands for lease. So there's some cash outlay each year for the next usually 7 years. Donna, or are those 5? I think they're 7.
7, I believe, is correct.
So we went to Public Works and they gave us a show and tell of all their equipment and showed their strengths and weaknesses. I believe some of this is pent up demand from last year where the requests were in there, but between the selectmen and the Board of Finance, some of these projects were cut from last year's budget. So now they're catching up to us. And in terms of there's one so-called big dump truck and a new vehicle for the Public Works Director, and his vehicle will get handed down to the work crews. And then the small dump truck, which is used throughout the year. Any questions on that? Let's see.
Can I just point out while you have the screen right where you are, Stuart, for those who are new to this format, the yellow box in the first white column for the year, we're talking about that 645,035 where the mouse is, that is the amount from taxation. So that is the amount affecting the fiscal year budget coming up that we are working with. That is a little bit of an increase over previous recent fiscal years. We're in the 5s, I believe, mid to high 5s. And this was originally what CIP was shooting for last year until everything got stopped by coronavirus. And it was pulled back to a bare minimums capital plan to get through what is the current fiscal year, but it was last year's budget process. So that 645 is the key number.
Going back to line 105, the salt shed, there was some leftover funding from the Turnpike Road project, which was funded through the STEEP grants, and Small Town Economic Assistance Program. And through a lot of persistent work by Erica and probably a few other people, right now they said we can have that leftover money to work on the salt shed. They're looking to increase the size of the salt shed and obviously replace what is there. And while it's not as much as money as they'd like, we believe that, well, I believe anyways, they can make a pretty good salt shed for $347. Part of that is to an effort to have more sand, salt on hand, so they can go more than a storm or two without having to replenish. Depending on the frequencies of the storm, deliveries can sometimes be a problem. Line 106, the Scofield Road drainage. This has been around almost as long as Village Hill. There's a lot of water coming down the bottom of Scofield Road, and it needs a more appropriate method to get rid of it. The $15,000, which is being paid out of LOSIP, is for the engineering of that, deciding where the catch basins are going to go, how big the pipe needs to be, and that sort of thing. And that will be, in the out years, will determine the cost to get that project done. Line 108 is the Village Hill Drainage Phase 1. This one's been around since they built the bridge at the bottom of Village Hill and then some. So a couple decades, pretty close. A similar thing, water is a problem. It comes down the hill, it sheets across the road, and they have to continually sand it. And there's little, if any, catch basins coming down the hill. They did build provisions into it when they built the bridge. So now it's a matter of going up the hill. $35,000 is not the cost of the project, but that's year one of getting some piping and catch basins and rental of appropriate equipment to have the town crew do it. This is kind of the first step for a big project for the town crew, and we're hoping that's be the most economic way to keep going up that hill and take care of that drainage. There is money in the out years for this to continue it, And hopefully
Stuart,
yes,
while you're on those road projects, how far out is the Liska Road culverts? Where do they show up to start in the plan? There you go.
so one reason that's out that
24,
far,
25.
it's that 750,000, I believe, which is on that bond anticipation note. The estimated cost to do the Liska Road culvert, which is kind of a super duper culvert, is $750,000. And there's no way to fund that out of our year-to-year CIP money. I mean, that would get rid of, if we just tried to pay for it in 1 year, that would wipe everything out for, probably a year and a half on that one project. So the thought was the only way to pay for something of that magnitude is to do a long-term bond and perhaps coupled with some other projects and take care of it there. It's subject to change in terms of, the annual inspection that the bridge people do. It's kind of the culvert and bridge, right? If you go right off of Moose Meadow, that's where you have to go over the waterway. If that becomes more of a problem, that might become more of a priority, but it's still got a big price tag.
Thank you.
Let's see. No, the line 120, 121, 122. The Conservation Commission has approached us to say that they've identified a piece of land that they wish to purchase, which is adjacent to a big parcel that they already have set aside for open space. There is an open space fund that has money in it already. And so this fiscal year, the one we're in right now, they're spending some of that money for appraisal and surveying in order to develop an offer to purchase it. So they're expending some of that money now. There is no set price. There's a guesstimated price right now. And there's also an opportunity, again, not guaranteed, to get a significant reimbursement from the state of Connecticut's open space fund. So that one's to, if things go according to plan, this is some of the money that they're looking at to doing it. I said the appraisal's not done, so it could be 100,000, it could be 150. It ultimately, I believe, ends up at a town meeting or a referendum to get approval. So just by having it on the plan here doesn't make this happen right away, but the Conservation Commission feels this is an appropriate piece of property. It's rare that you find one adjacent to some other properties you already own. So it makes it one big contiguous parcel as opposed to having little pieces here and there all over town. So contingent on the appraisal and the negotiations with the homeowner or the parcel owner, that kind of sets the expense side of things. And then the other part is depending on the timing is the approaching the state for hopefully up to 50% of that money. That does change as time goes on at the state level. You never know if they have a good year or bad year, funding is there. But this is as much as we know right now, this is the hope for the Conservation Commission to get a chunk of land. Any questions on that? Going once, going twice. We're getting towards the bottom. Line 124 is to replace the self-contained breathing apparatus cylinders for Wellington 1. They have a shelf life of 15 years. We're not allowed to use them after that. DOT has said that we have to actually throw them out. And there's a bunch expiring within the next year. So that's what that's in there for. Line 126 is actually a joint project between Wellington 1 and Wellington Hill Fire Departments. One of the test devices that we've had for the last 10, 12 years has been a machine that measures how well your masks fit. Previously, it was only used for the firefighting type masks. The new machine will also do the N95 masks, or the souped up surgical masks, which obviously over the past year has been important. We're using masks that have been provided by the state, but there's a dozen brands or more, and there's no proof that they fit any of our people. They do come in sizes. So the idea is to test them to make sure that they're sealing appropriately from the hazardous situations they're put into. The old machine is completely unsupported right now. It runs under DOS. If you remember that, it's really old, and we have one old computer that runs it, but the company cannot calibrate it anymore, and it's totally unsupported. So the hope is to get that machine, and that'll be shared between both departments.
Stuart, I might add that this is an OSHA compliance issue as well, right?
Yeah, the OSHA requires an annual fit testing, and we just can't go by the old machine because we can't calibrate it. And so it gives us the opportunity to get back to where we need to be. Line 144 is the River Road Athletic Complex, and this is a request for the pickleball court. This has been requested for the last few years, and for those in the know, that pickleball apparently is the latest hot thing. The hit a ball back and forth, I guess, and it will be put in the location where the volleyball court is. By all reports, the volleyball court is barely used at all for volleyball at the very least. And so this was an opportunity to change direction a little bit and put something in that would get a lot more use.
That was in the plan last year, right? Approved. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's one of those things that got
Budget cut victim. Yeah.
Yeah, these 3 vehicles, the Hall School Library painting, the concrete floor. I believe those are the, don't think the chips, I think those are the ones that were cut, that had been approved in the plan and then got cut.
So the so-called small projects in there are typical of year-to-year kind of things. As I mentioned before, the 2 big ones are the building committee, school building committee consultant money, and the 2 fire panels. Those are big, and there's only one way to pay for those. And so that's what I would present is the cause of the increase in the bottom line for that. For your budget impact for this year, for this coming year.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Stuart while he's on there? And thank you, obviously, Stuart, for that.
Yes, this is Brenda Abrams. I do have a question. I was curious to know with the visual and audio for the $33,000, I was wondering when Erica does plan to open meetings to the public.
Erica, I'll leave that one up to you.
Sure. So right now we can have I think the safest way is to have a hybrid meeting. But in order to have a hybrid meeting, we have to have the technology in the building to be able to record the folks that are here in the town hall. So some of these things are necessary to do that, which is why we haven't attempted to go that route yet. The actual first piece of this, which is it's the smart board, like it looks like a giant screen television on a rolling cart, and it has a computer attached to it. That came in, I think, 2 weeks ago. And so we are still working out the kinks. I tested it and sat in a meeting that I wasn't recording, thank goodness, because it kicked me off. So we're still working out the bugs there, but we need to have the appropriate audio visual equipment in order to go hybrid right now. So as as the governor releases some new guidelines on open, we'll start working on an open plan and towards meetings in person. We will still require masks in this building, so that adds a whole new level of not being able to see folks while you're talking to them too. But it'll be doable. I don't have an exact date for you, Brenda.
Okay, because I think that it might be a reasonable to think that we might be back to public meetings in July, the new fiscal year, and $33,000 is a lot of money.
I agree with you. I would like us to be back to public meetings by then, but if you can imagine, we have no way to record or stream our meetings, and I think it's important to share and be as open and transparent. There are many towns in this state offer meetings through a streaming. You can do YouTube Live through their own channels, through cable access, but that comes with technology, and that technology comes with a price. I think we have a responsibility to our residents to make ourselves accessible to them, and it's time. And this really, if this is the catalyst that gets us there, I think it's important to do.
Okay.
Eric, can I also clarify that at this point, we cannot have public meetings without streaming capability or Zoom or something like we're doing now. Is that correct?
Correct. We have to allow at least for people to call in to be able to listen to live our meetings. And we're not quite there yet.
Erica?
So, yes, Peter.
I may have missed it someplace in the spiel, but I didn't hear a timeline or a suggested timeline or a hopeful timeline.
I don't have a hopeful timeline. The governor put out some new restrictions or lessening of those today. I haven't really had an opportunity to go through them other than to see them very briefly. So I don't have a set timeline. I can tell you that as of right now, the governor's executive order it ends on April 19th, and then it will go, any changes at that point go to the legislature.
Okay, I was just wondering if we had some kind of feeling on the technology, whether that was days away, weeks away, months away, years away.
Oh, no, I'd like to have it in place before our town meeting. So
okay.
We're working on the next steps. So
I'm wondering, would the town members be able to continue the Zooms, whether we're public opened or not public opened? Would they still be able to Zoom in, whether they feel comfortable coming to a public meeting or not come to a public meeting? Would that still be available to them after April?
So after April, if we go back to normal, our meetings are in person. I don't know that Zoom would be the platform we would use. You look at a live stream. We're working with our IT on what the best way to do that is. YouTube has a live stream we could do. EOS Region 19 uses that particular model. So I don't think Zoom is the best model. And when one of your little boxes could be 6 people at a table, it gets a little bit different. So there'll be a different method, but live participation in the room would happen in the room, and people could live stream, so they would have access, and then we continue to record those meetings.
Who would vote?
Hang on a second.
You have to be in the room to vote. It would be a live stream. It would not be a
Order,
live
please.
interaction.
Order, please. We've got people in line waiting to talk. Lisa?
Me?
Raise your hand, Lisa.
Sorry, I think my question was answered.
Okay. Matt, what was your question?
I already got it answered.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Any other questions on CIP?
Well, I was also wondering about Scofield Road. So if Stuart could kind of make it a little clear what the work would be done on Scofield. I live on Scofield, and at the bottom of the hill, I don't find a problem. I drive it every day, and there's no ice buildup. I don't see any problem on Scofield Road.
This is identified many years ago by the Public Works Department and the town engineer. I believe in Troy, if you want to pipe up, or Erica, that they're out there continuously sanding that. Also, some of it has to do with the discharge of water through people's properties, and in terms of flooding their yards when the good rainstorm comes. There are limited catch basins there, but a lot of that water comes across the road as opposed to staying on either side.
So Brenda, the engineering would tell us more, a better idea of the total scope, since the project has been around for over 25 years.
Okay. And one more question, I'm sorry. Pickleball. So are there a lot of residents of Wellington that have a large interest in pickleball rather than basketball? Because I live right at the bottom of the hill and I see that basketball court being used all the time.
It's volleyball, not basketball.
You're right.
The
So the-
basketball court would stay. The volleyball court, which is
Mhm.
rarely used as a volleyball court, would
Mhm.
be repurposed to a pickleball court. Right now, there are pickleball lines on the basketball court, but it means you can only do one or the other. And as you said, the basketball court is heavily used, and pickleball has been in high demand. Before pre-COVID, we had pickleball inside at Hall School, and
Mhm.
then our then Public Works Direct, Parks and Rec Director had a program outside using the basketball court, and it was full just about every time she offered it. So it is something that has become very popular.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, any more board questions for CIP? All right, it's 8:05. Let's get moving on to Board of Selectmen.
All right, thank you. So thanks for switching that around. I think that will make more sense. I hope you all had an opportunity to take a look at the budget that the Board of Selectmen sent to you. Although we know that you asked for a 0% increase, including those CIP items, which was a net cost of $100,235 in this current budget. We are presenting a budget for 21-22 of $791,949, which is a $264,189 increase over the current fiscal year. In my letter to you all, I highlighted a few items. I'll go through some of those assumptions. Salaries were all shown flat in this budget. As negotiations, if you recall, we extended the contract last year 1 year due to COVID and the ability to negotiate together. So we should be beginning the negotiation process. So that is yet to be determined by our CBA. Heating fuel, we locked in at $1.6342, and diesel fuel at $1.6422. That is a significant savings over this current fiscal year. So just in the selectmen's budget, that saved us $11,575 in diesel and heating fuel. And I think in the Board of Education budget, you saw another savings on that end. We have one employee insurance placeholder assumed in this budget. Our workers' compensation increase is capped at 3%, and we had a decrease in our LAP at -3%. Our medical insurance premiums will be 2%. We did get a final rate that we were able to lock into down from our original number. And our dental assumption in this budget is 6%. Although I will tell you, we believe it could be decreased further. And so if that number is known to us, that decrease is known to us prior to your final budget decisions, we will pass along that savings. We anticipate, if you don't mind, Matt, if I could go through and then we could come back and ask questions, if that's okay. Is anyone opposed to that? Okay. New cyber insurance. Kerma, our current provider, is no longer providing that. As you know, this is a larger situation across the country. And so cyber insurance is something that we're going to need further and much more costly than we were paying. We got an initial quote for budget purposes, and it came in with a $5,000 cost to the town. So we use that dollar amount here. All right, we share IT services with the Board of Education, and our portion, which is, the split is 53%, 47% Board of Ed, is a 2% increase. I did go through and highlight some of the large increases or decreases. in each department. If you would like, I can go over those. I don't know how much you went through the budget. I will mention that CIP, again, the net increase in this budget is $100,235, and that comes in different areas. One increase is in the Public Works Department, where you'll see the repayment of leases for Public Works vehicles. There's a significant decrease in the capital reserve. And then capital expenditures is the largest increase at $165,299. In the selectmen's budget, and I'll highlight some of these which I shared with you. In the selectmen's budget, their overall increase there is $540. There is a $400 increase in the historic district line item, and that was for signage and certificates of appropriateness for the historic district on the green, and a $140 increase for cell phone. If you recall last year, I came to you asking for an increase. I believe the first selectman's office is someone who's on call 24 hours a day. And currently there's a stipend for $30 a month for cell phone usage. I think it would be important to have the town own that particular phone, and it would stay with the town and not, the information would not leave with the individual. I was able to contact our current vendor and negotiate different rates for the two other town-owned phones, the Animal Control and Public Works, and save the town $510 annually by adding that third line and adjusting the two phones that we do have. So instead of the large increase that I asked for last year based on usage, this year it's $140 increase. In the accounting services department, you'll see a $2,357 increase. That reflects additional dollars for training with our new finance software and an increase in the annual software support. And I can't tell you how valuable that is. The selectmen even questioned Donna as to whether or not she needed more dollars for training. If you can imagine such an incredible change in the middle of a pandemic, none of it was able to be done in person like we had originally planned. I see Lori shaking her head. All of their trainings are virtual like this. So this will allow some additional training next year. A department that has a large increase is town hall operations. The increase is a net cost of $39,824. The biggest drivers there is the 2% increase in our IT services with Novus, as well as a separate project for the town's Microsoft licensing, which includes cloud hosting. That's a large project that the number of hours it takes would not fall into our annual contract. Large projects like that would be done separate. And this is not a cost that we would split with the Board of Education because it only affects the town. Currently, the town is using the school's Microsoft licensing. It's a no-no. As soon as they come down on us, we'll have to change no matter what. I will tell you that I have recently discovered our previous vendors bid for this particular job in 2016. And it was a little bit more than this then. It was somewhere in the $90,000 range. So we have a much better IT company now. And the majority of that is labor and the number of hours to do this particular job. The other increase you'll see is our security and fire monitoring. We were paying $250 a year for fire and for security. That vendor is no longer offering that service, so we are having to go out. So the increase cost there, you'll see $740 as opposed to $250. Postage has gone up to 51 cents as of this past January, so we accounted for that increase in the next fiscal year. And you see a decrease in our maintenance and miscellaneous. line item, we have a one-time project in this current fiscal year that we will not need next year. So we went back down to $12,000. The consulting engineers line item, last year Board of Finance cut our request from $10,000 to $7,500 in each land use and public works. We're requesting that be returned to previous levels based on some projects we have currently identified as needing. And I think Mike D'Amato spoke to that in his budget as well, some land use items they believe that they will need. The Liska Road project that one of you asked about, the engineering was taken out of CIP. And so the plan is to have it done out of our operating budget. So right off the bat, we know we have some expenses for the engineering for that project. So we'd asked to go back from $7,500 in each line item to $10,000. Public Works, bid increase is an $89,029 increase overall. Highlight some of the large increases. The biggest ask this year is for an additional staff member, a full-time laborer. And the cost of that, just the salary cost. Where's Peter? I know he's going to ask, so I have those numbers. The salary cost is $48,422. We believe that the needs of the town warrant an additional full-time crew member. We have a four-person full-time public works, and the demands of that department are increasing for sure. We budgeted insurance at the highest rate, not knowing who we would get, in the total broken down in corresponding insurance line items is $28,473. Because we have asked for that added employee, we decreased the snow contractor. As you know, you've heard me mention before, we've had difficulties getting contractors. When we put the bid out for 2, we only received 1. So we had to supplement with a public works employee for the last 2 seasons. If for some reason we were not to get the full-time employee, we would need to put back into the budget dollars for 2 snow contractors, and that dollar amount would be $66,150. From my perspective, there is a savings between the full-time employee salary and benefits cost of $10,745. But we would not get the same benefit at all. We would only be getting the benefit of someone to help plow, and not with the rest of the work that needs to be maintained year-round. And believe that the town would be better served with budgeted funds towards an additional staff member. There's a $10,000 increase in public works vehicle maintenance. Our aging fleet has led to many more non-routine repairs. We just got back, I think it was today, a truck with another major repair. So the potential purchase of new vehicles may see a slight decrease in that, but none of these things are guaranteed or expected. There is a $25,000 increase in tree removal with the identification of several diseased trees, including the emerald ash borer. There's a need for increased removal. I'll give you an example. If you happen to be on Old Farms Road last week, they removed some trees. The work they did over the course of 4 days cost us $6,000. Just over $6,000 is the estimated amount. So it is very costly to remove trees, and Troy feels that it's important that we remove them for safety purposes. And you'll note a $31,587 increase in lease principal payments, and that's a direct result of items in the CIP plan. The transfer station has an overall increase of $28,000. The bulk of that $26,000 is contractual, and that's for our bulky and household waste. Our contract vendor increased their rate significantly. We work to see if we could lower those rates. We were able to get them to lower them for the remainder of this fiscal year, but they remain steadfast in their operating costs, warranting the increase going forward. And there's an increase in well monitoring of $2,000, and that is a contractual item. All right. You heard from Human Services and Animal Control in a separate presentation to your budget, although their budgets are reflected within the Selectmen's budget. And one of those additional cuts that I made with a cell phone came from the, I believe it was $500 or $450 from the Public Works Director phone, and $200 from the Animal Control line item. We're currently working with our IT to make a potential adjustment to our phone system, and that may significantly decrease costs for phones. And so again, as soon as we know that, if it's before any final decisions are made, we will pass that savings along to you. That's an item that has come up in the last couple of days, and we're meeting with them hopefully tomorrow. So those are the highlights.
All right, Erica, thank you very much.
You're
for
welcome.
highlights. Board members with questions?
Well, I just want to ask about the extra cost for that FTE in Public Works.
Yes.
And I guess that would be insurance and other benefits.
So you want to know the amount, Steph?
Yeah, like
Okay,
it,
so,
I
yeah.
did is 48 for the salary.
Yep, and I think I said, I apologize if you didn't hear that. It's 28,473 is what we budgeted for all of the insurances, and that's an employee plus family. So
Okay.
we went with the highest adjustment because you don't know who you will.
I thought you said that, but there was another figure there that was similar. So that's roughly rounding up about 80,000 as a total FTE
It's
package.
76.
Okay.
Change.
And
Excuse me.
and the savings from contractors that have done similar work is 23,000,
So
which is
no,
about half the
so-
salary. I know that's not comprehensive.
Right, so it would be a savings of 10,000, budgeted savings of $10,745. But again, all we get from the contractors is response during a snow or ice event.
Okay, so what was because I saw the 23,000 one.
That's what we decreased. So that was based on, because we have had difficulty getting vendors, and we know what they're being paid everywhere else. We budgeted a different assumption than in the past. I won't tell you what that is because we are going out to bid, so I don't want to tip our whole hat.
But we are tweaking that number.
We have tweaked that number. So for 2 contractors now, the budget would increase. That line item would increase if we use that to $66,150. And hoping that that's what the bid came in at. Again, it's something that would go out to bid if we go that direction. So the budget proposal you have in front of you does not include contracted work currently.
Oh, Erica, just to make sure I understand that clearly, that 60-some thousand number you use, 66 or whatever, that was for 1 or 2 contractors?
2.
2, okay.
It's what we would put in if we were
Yes.
going with that, but that's not what is in the budget. So the current budgeted number was 23,000. And so we decreased that over this current fiscal year, going with a full-time employee instead of contractors.
So right
We only
now,
had one, that 23,000 was only one, Mike. We adjusted
in
the
the
budget
current
this year.
fiscal year.
Correct.
Current
We
fiscal
knew we
year,
only
right.
had one contractor, so we adjusted the budget in this fiscal year. It's a 2-year contract.
Okay. Okay, so 1 full-time employee replaces 1 contractor where you used to have 2 contractors.
Correct. We had to supplement with one of our staff members plowing currently because we could not get another contractor. And when we knew we only had one, Troy had gone out and, made phone calls to people who had we'd done contract work with in the past, people he knew, and we got nobody.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Stephanie, I jumped in on your questions there. Do you have more?
No, I guess that's the first one, only that, in the context of all of our union contracts being in negotiation in the summer or before the summer, that I think that we have to put a particularly sharp lens on any additional staff, because that seems to me to be a lot of payroll impact. And even, I'm not at all saying there isn't work to be done in town, but that's just, it's a hard ask this year, I think.
I will tell you, the selectmen cut more positions that were asked for because we knew that just wasn't something we could do in 1 year. If we were to do that, it would have to be rolled out slowly. But we felt that the needs were significant enough that to warrant an additional staff member. So, but we hear what you're saying, and we don't discount that there's an increased cost there.
It would be good to see a corollary to, in savings that's more in keeping with what the actual price tag is for a full-time equivalent. So I don't know if there's other places in the budget that would show up or not, but
where we'd cut,
where we have savings that sort of support the idea of a staff person.
Okay, I think Matt, you were next.
I'm all set. Thanks.
Okay, Lisa?
Erica, so some of the things that come to my mind is when you have a contract employee, you're hiring their expertise specifically for that job. So people that know our roads, have always plowed our roads, salt our roads, etc., whatever it is that you're contracting out for. Plus, you only use those contractors when there is an emergent situation. When you hire somebody, you have to have them do tasks every single day of the year, and it is spent money.
Mm-hmm.
And it is revenue with insurance benefits and all of the issues that go along with any injury or so on and so forth. And that's what the town benefits from when they go to registry or contracted employment. So the opportunity cost here of keeping a contracted employee, I think, is greater for the taxpayer. It's better for the taxpayer in this particular case. And I just wanted to point that out.
Sure. I'm going to disagree with you a little bit. I think what you're saying is accurate, but the work that we feel that needs to be done in public works isn't being done by that contracted employee. So we're contracting snow removal, and there is much more to do in the public works department than just snow removal. And so if all we were looking for is snow removal, Lisa, I agree with you. And if we can find the contractors, that is the better route to go. It is the less costly to the taxpayers, without a doubt. But there is a significant amount of work with our incredibly small crew that we believe warrants an additional full-time employee. But understand that, I hold fast to, I think there's a need for work, and I believe most of our departments are understaffed. I think that one is incredibly so.
So I probably would agree with you that we are very slim in our staffing, but Wellington hasn't grown in roads. It hasn't grown in buildings. It hasn't grown in houses per se. I mean, our base of, we still have 1,000+ homes. So why all of a sudden,
So it's twofold. One, before we went to contracting snow plowing, we had staff. So through for different reasons down the road, staff left, and we replaced those staff members with contractors for snow removal instead of in staffing. And so there's a need for work in public works. Our roads need significant, that's just one piece of public works. They're asked to maintain our facilities at the same time. We don't have a facilities director. When something goes wrong in one of these buildings, the first person they call is our public works department. And they're being called on more and more. So, you know, there is a need for work. It's not that we suddenly got more roads or suddenly needed more. And the other piece to that is we are having a more difficult time in finding people who just want to plow snow. They have to have their own vehicle. They have to have a backup vehicle. They must have insurance. They must, you know, there's a lot of things that, and they'll go out somewhere else and make more money than they were making from the town of Willington. And so if we had no other choice and we had to go in that direction, we budgeted for more dollars, hoping that would make it more enticing to someone to come out and do that work. But you're seeing less folks do that. They can go to the state and they get guaranteed dollars from the state. So
Sure, I understand that, but I also understand the liability. So, you know, like I run a facility, and having the contractor come in and salt my driveway when it's icy means that he's liable for any situation that happens. If you put a full timer in, the town of Willington becomes a greater liability instead of contracting that service out. That's why it's more expensive when you're contracting out that expertise. And then the other part about it is that the 4 crew, how many full timers do we have in public works right now? 4?
we have 4.
Yeah,
And
we always had 4, correct?
There's 4. Then there's a full timer, but he's split between the transfer station and public works.
So there's 5 now.
No, there's 4 full-time public works, and there's one who's part-time public works, part-time.
So 4.5.
Yeah.
Okay, so 4.5 members. So you have had an increase in half a member since 11 years ago or 10 years ago. And what I heard over the years is that there's a management issue with time. The union has the ability to accrue a lot of time, which gives you a lot of less days. And now it seems to me, if you have 4.5 men with a lot of vacation and you're hiring somebody to complement their time off to get work done, that's not a value. That's the other problem I remember from years ago. It's a time management scheduling issue. And that shouldn't be rectified with putting a new body in place. Because you do have deficits during the year. You have some workers that only work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday every week all summer long because they have vacation time and they take it Monday and Friday. And so that should not be offset by the tax dollars, in my opinion. I think that's a management issue. And I think the labor needs to be managed well.
I could say to you that that's not at all why we're looking for a new employee, but you know, with a small crew, it does play a factor in the ability to get projects done. Their time is limited in the winter time because they must be available to plow snow. So they're under different limitations than the rest of our staff for sure.
Okay.
And the numbers that of the staff are crew, that's not counting Troy, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And so the last part about that is with less and less snowstorms, you know, some years you don't have any. I mean, I'm not saying that we're not going to have some, and I'm not going to say that those years are over, because we could have a pile of snow coming in the next 6 weeks, and I get that. And it's again, I just think it's a management issue. I think it's the ability of the head of public works to manage and schedule his staff. So, but anyway, that's my 2 cents.
Okay. I've got a couple questions, Erica.
You got it.
Back to the first page where your budget assumptions are, negotiations are forthcoming. I know we talked about this last year when you did the MOU.
Mm-hmm.
If I understand right, the budget discussions the contract discussions must have to come soon because this contract would take effect July 1. Is that correct?
Yes. So
Okay.
last year, the union demanded a negotiation. They sent their demand earlier. They had not yet. So we just sent a demand to the union. I look for that process to begin soon. I do
Okay.
not have any expectation. I do not desire to do an extended MOU like we did this year. That was very different circumstances. So I see us moving forth with negotiations.
Okay, and we discussed to some extent, I know there was discussion last year about having Board of Finance representation in that negotiations. Where do we think that is this year? That
Oh,
was,
I think that would remain the same. I think that's been standard. And so our attorney just, I think 2 days ago, sent the demand. So as we set things, we will move forward with
finance rep.
yes, a finance rep and board members.
Okay, then we answered some of my questions on the next page. That page, it looks, actually, we got all the questions I had. So everybody else got all the other questions I had.
No, Lisa has one.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Thank you, Erica.
Hang on a second, Lisa.
Oh.
Hang on.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I just want to, I want to make sure, again, anybody else before we come back to Lisa. Okay, Lisa, go ahead.
On page 7, my copy that I received, and I'm wondering if everybody received this, on fiscal year 2021, 2022, percent change didn't come out because the column wasn't big enough. You got division.
same
You see
thing.
what I'm saying,
Yeah.
Donna? So Donna, can you resend that so
Hang
that
on a
all the
second.
columns in the spreadsheet can show all real numbers?
Lisa,
Yeah.
the reason I think it's not about column size, I think it's because in the current fiscal year, it's not budgeted. So it's a new add to the budget line, which screws up the formula. The formula is saying you can't divide this by 0.
Right.
So
Okay,
they're
with the
saying,
current
so
fiscal year, it's
division means
100%.
100% increase.
Right. So that was actually moved out of the senior center budget. And Donna, do you want to speak to that? I think Lisa is talking about like the first line of page 7. Well, Donna
Capital
may not be
projects.
looking. It's Department 300 capital projects, Donna.
Yes, I know what she's talking about. It's
Yeah.
$1,000, and it is a fund transfer for the handicap van fund that happens every year and has been happening for several years in the past, except it was budgeted in the senior center operating budget, which is not the correct place for it. So it is out of the senior center budget, which is Department 185, and it is in the fund transfer to capital projects, where it will be moved to the capital project for the handicap van for the seniors.
So Lisa, on page 4, the last item under senior center operations, senior center program was 2,000. It's now 1,000. And the 1,000 was moved to this line item. So it is 100% increase in that particular line item, but it's a net 0.
All right. So there's a lot of line items that don't have clear explanations per se until we talk to Donna.
Not necessarily, well, I mean, I can tell you what they are.
Yeah, right. I get that.
That's one that was just moved last minute. So it was moved out of one department and into another.
So I'm not worried about the handicap van.
Right.
I'm just wondering like how to read the sheet, you know?
Well, if you follow down that column, the next two that say divide by 0 with an exclamation point, because there's nothing in those.
Nothing there.
Right, but if you go to the employee that Erica is requesting, it's 48,422, and then it has the division over 0 again.
Because there was no budget.
There was nothing in the year.
Right, so it's a total 100%. It's just a huge increase. Okay, thank you.
Where it does show up, Lisa, just for follow through, the math does end up coming out at the bottom of each department or section. So
Okay.
that $8,000 increase you see for the employee, on that employee's line, it messes up the formula and
Yep.
gives that division thing, but the money carries down to the bottom of that department, does affect that bottom line.
Okay, I see that 14.7%. Got it.
Yeah, that's where it
Got
shows.
it. Okay. Thank you.
Other questions for Erica on the Board of Selectmen budget?
Pete is raising his hand.
And Pete is raising his hand.
Where is Pete? Why am I? Oh, there we go. See you, Pete. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm looking at page 4, Department 0241, Object 500, the building permit system support. Is
Yeah.
that the software support?
Yes.
That goes up every year. We're paying more and more to support that system every year? Because it looks like we paid 9,000 in 1920, 10,800 in 2021, and we're looking at 11,168 in 21-22.
That is correct.
Okay. And have we figured out how much per building permit we're paying for that program at this point? Because if I remember back a couple of years, and granted my memory is faulty at best, we figured that out at like around $10 per permit just to run the program. And I was wondering if that's changed, or what our per transaction cost on that is.
I don't have a number for you now, Peter. We can look into it. It's
Thank
also,
you.
it's used for more than just building permits.
No, I understand. I understand the
I'll have
entire.
to look at all of them. We used it for.
Yeah,
dog
I was on the
licensing.
board at the time we approved
Yep.
I was on the board at the time the board approved the expenditure for that system.
Yeah, so I'll get that number, but
I'm
it's now,
just
it will
following up.
include dog licensing. It was that system was integral in being able to manage during this pandemic, for sure.
All right. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board for Erica? All right, thank you, Erica.
Thank you.
We are on to item C, revenue presentation.
All right, I'm gonna share my screen again for Lori. Lori, I don't know which of the documents you want first.
That looks fine. I'll just go with that.
Okay, I have them both.
All right. Did everyone get my email with the notes?
I sure hope so.
Okay.
I intended to send it out.
I mean, I'm going to kind of cover that, but basically these two different documents are similar, but the numbers are different. If you notice, just so you can see how the revenue budget has changed over the past 3 years. The approved budget from 18-19, 19-20, and then the current year approved budget. And then the column that's darkened a little bit is the projected ending budget, which means what we anticipate having at the end of this year. And some numbers are higher, some numbers are lower. But if you can scroll down a little bit, Erica, if you look at the bottom line, we anticipate that the change total will be $20,000 more than what we had planned, even though some of those numbers, have changed. So this sheet really tells you the difference between the approved budget, where we think it's going to be, what those numbers are. And then if you can go back to the top again, Erica, sorry. The final column is the change between where we think we're going to be at the end of the year and the proposed budget. So the numbers are a little different on this sheet than they are on the other sheet, because this one deals with where we think we're going to be at the end of the year compared to what was approved and compared to next year. Does that make sense?
Lori, if I can just ask, so what you're
Yep.
saying is the bottom line here is you are anticipating that at the end of this fiscal year, June 30th, once you close the books, that you're going to be $581,070 stronger?
No, $20,000 stronger.
Okay, so then what's the last column with the
The
five?
last column is the difference between where this projected budget is and next year's anticipated budget,
I got it.
proposed budget. So,
Yes, okay. I see.
okay, so what you just highlighted is not the numbers that I'm comparing. I'm comparing the 17,723 column
There you go.
to next year's proposed.
which is the 18,305,296.
Yes, and so the final column is the difference between where we think we're going to be at the end of the year and next year's proposed budget.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I can talk about, well, let's look at the other sheet first, and then I'll talk about some of those numbers and why they're different. So this 2-page revenue draft for the Board of Finance compares the current budget as it was approved with the proposed budget, the change in the numbers, and the percent change. And this includes the proposed budgets as they've been presented, general government, K through 8 education, and Region 19. And we basically have 3 sources of revenue in the town. We have the state of Connecticut, we have local revenues, and we have educational revenues. And if you look at the percent change between the current year and the proposed year, the educational revenues actually are going up a little bit. The educational cost sharing is going up. This, according to the governor's budget, we don't know if that's what's going to pass, but you know, that's what we're going with. Local revenues look like they're way down. They are way down, but that's only a small part of our budget. The biggest hit that we took was interest income. We had last year, we had budgeted $75,000 in interest income, and we probably took in over $80,000. And this year we're running about 6% of that interest. Just the bottom dropped out of, you know, all the interest rates. And so I anticipate we'll have about $4,500 at the end of this fiscal year instead of $75,000. We have no control over that. That's just the way the rates are. And for next year's projected budget, if you can go down, this first page is kind of, you know, so you can see a summary, and then the second page is really the specifics on the revenue. So you can see that some of the judicial fines were down this year. Well, they were down because people aren't driving on roads to get speeding tickets, and, you know, just things were very different in the pandemic. And so they're down quite a bit this year. And I think things are going to start back to normal. So I budgeted 10,000 for next year instead of 15. I don't know where that's going to be. But if things start getting back to normal, I think those judicial fines will go back up again. So it's $5,000 less than we have in the budget this year because it has gone down a lot. And really the other big changes, the interest on investments, as I mentioned, and town clerk fees are down. Again, I think with the pandemic, we have certain things like building fees are up, but other fees in town are down. So it's just with the pandemic, things are not normal. And I anticipate, I'm just making an educated guess, that things will start to go back to more of a normal, maybe not exactly the same as before. So I don't know what questions you have. I don't know. Let me see if I just covered the highlights. The Board of Assessment Appeals, we had a huge decrease, I think, from an apartment building or something. This year, the Board of Assessment Appeals, as you can see, for the current budget was down $2.36 million. Normally it's 100,000. There was some big apartment issue or something. I don't remember. The proposed budget, I went back to 100,000, partly because we only have 2 appeals coming up at the Board of Assessment Appeals. And one of them is another apartment building, but we have no idea what's happening with that. And it's maybe something that ends up going to the courts. So we can't determine that before that meeting. So I just put that budget item back to where it was previously after talking to the assessors. We think that's reasonable.
Ike,
Yes, Peter.
I see that Christina has joined us.
Okay, I did see that. Hi, Christina.
Hello.
Hi, Christina.
I'm sorry, Lori, were you done?
Sorry,
I don't know if you want to leave it up for people having questions.
Yeah,
You know, but
I have a couple questions.
All right,
Lori.
hang on a second. For the good of the order here, Erica, I was talking to Christina purposely. I was just going to ask if she was ready to resume. Are you ready?
I'm ready to resume.
Okay,
Or to
thank you,
assume.
Lisa.
Ready to assume.
Marissa, if you just note the time, please.
Yep.
Thank you. All right, continue on.
Yeah. Lori?
Yes, Peter.
I had two questions. One is did I read that right? In the revenues, we're dropping 20%?
That's in our local revenue, which is not a huge part of our budget, and that's primarily the interest rates. And hold on, let me look at my other sheet. So if you look at the first sheet, I don't know if Erica wants to put that back up, the first sheet again.
Yeah, the first sheet was where my second question was.
Yeah, the building fees are up and planning and zoning fees are down. Inland wetland fees are down. Permits for pistols and so on is up. Town clerk fees are down. So I think the pandemic has just kind of thrown everything for a loop. No, the other sheet the other one, Erica, not this one. Yeah, yeah, right there, right there. Perfect, thank you.
You're welcome.
Do you see how in the second shaded column, the third column from the right, building fees are up $5,000, planning and zoning down $7,000. It's just the pandemic. I don't know why some are up and some are down, but it's just wonky, you know. And in the other column towards the bottom, we are $5,000 higher, and that's primarily refunds that we received for things that didn't happen. Like there was one refund from CREC for something for which we had paid that they gave us a refund because it didn't happen last spring. And so that'll go back to $30,000 instead of $35,000. So a lot of those weird changes and the interest rates, I think those are all due to the pandemic. But if you look at the totals our budget is an $18 million budget proposed for next year. And our town local revenue is 200 and something thousand dollars. It's not, yes, it went down 20%, but it's 20% of a really small part of our budget. Does that make sense?
Yes, and thank you for explaining that. And that where those two yellow lines were on that previous page. So is that 581,870? Yeah, right there where your cursor is. What does that represent? That represents an increase in revenue or a shortfall or?
No, this is, well, that's the revenue that we would need to have if we go with the budgets as they're proposed. And so, and I didn't mention this earlier, but if you look down just below the highlighted, this year we decided to take 673,000 out of the fund balance. And I remember the discussion at the Board of Finance last year was very strongly about not having our fund balance above the recommended, because that means the town is hanging on to money that really belongs to the taxpayers. And so that $400,000 in the second to last column is fund balance applied to this new proposed budget. And that if we spent $400,000 out of our fund balance, that would put our fund balance at 12% of this 18 million budget.
And so at the end of all this, when we finally churn numbers towards the end and are trying to find mill rates, that should reflect what we need to raise in property taxes by using that much money there?
Yes, in the first page of my other sheet, again, with proposed numbers, you see the 21, 22. The expenditures are at the top as they've been requested, and then the revenues, and then we have the revenue adjustments, and then the grand list, and less some things that we don't, that are reduced by, and that's potentially where we are. Does that make sense, Peter?
Yeah, yes, it makes sense, but I'm not absorbing the numbers quite as quickly as I would hope to. But that's a me thing. Thank you.
No, any other questions? I mean, I've been looking at these numbers for weeks and you guys are, just seeing them. So if you have other questions or I haven't explained something well,
Or Lori, so if I'm understanding what you're saying is the farthest right column, the lowest number is the 6.4%. Are you saying that is the change? That's the mill rate change, 6%?
yes.
Okay, so that's a mill increase of 1.92 over the current.
Yes, and of course, I'm sure that the Board of Finance members understand this, but we have no control over the Region 19 changes. That's all based on how many students we have at Region 19. And yes, we vote on that budget in the referendum, but this year we just have more students at Region 19, and that's why that number is higher, which is why our bottom line is that much higher.
Right, so I think, Peter, that's kind of your question, right? Is that bottom right corner, this is right now showing a 6.4% increase in the mill rate. And that's kind of what you're looking at, right?
Yeah, that was exactly what I was looking for, and we're really increasing our amount out of the fund balance, and so if we've increased that and we need to increase the mill rate, that's problematic.
No, we're not increasing
Decrease.
it. We're decreasing it from last year. We took 673,000 out for the current
Okay.
year.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So it's going from 673 to 400 and something. Got it. Thank you.
Lori, are you saying though that in addition to that 400,000 out of the fund balance, that the mill rate would still need to go up almost 2 points?
Yes, with the budget that's been presented.
Okay. Where do the fishing fees go? Because the governor opened the fishing season today.
Probably, I don't know.
That's
Not gonna make a
$26.
big impact?
Those go into town clerk fees.
Okay, that would have been my guess.
He's gonna
It's
be
probably
happy to come into that tomorrow.
Yeah. Other questions?
Any other board questions for Lori while she's here? Okay.
I
Christina
have a
has one.
question. Sorry, I just, and I really don't know the answer to this. Maybe you do, Lori. So why did you choose 400 as the applied fund balance number? Is it just
I chose that because last year I remember a lot of discussion on the Board of Finance about not maintaining more than 12%. The recommended amount that we should have in our coffers is 8 to 12%. And if we spend that 400,000, we will be at 12%.
okay?
I just chose that number for that reason, because I remember there was a lot of discussion about we shouldn't have our fund balance above the recommended amount because that's taking the taxpayers' money.
Mhm.
And so I chose that amount, and then that puts us exactly at 12%.
Great, thank you.
Yes, you're welcome.
Lisa, go ahead.
But Lori, we don't have to, and Mike, we don't have to be at 12%. We could end up putting more from the fund balance in.
Yeah,
Well,
that's
the policy is 8 to 12. So this is
Okay.
just giving us a starting point.
Yep.
You know, as you well remember, once we start moving the numbers in Donna's magic spreadsheet, and trying to figure out balance of taxation versus using fund balances and all this stuff,
And over taxation.
right? We'll move those numbers around, but this gives us a starting point which was not predicated on the large grab we made this year from the fund balance. It moves it back to a 400, which is similar to what we've been doing before.
Yep.
Other questions for Lori?
Steph, is your hand up?
No.
Oh, I see the little hand, but that's probably my hand. I don't know. Anybody else?
Thank you, Lori.
You're welcome.
Okay, anything else in the world of budget discussion for tonight before we leave this agenda? Again, I'd like to reinforce that people should please consider any questions you have for the people who have brought budgets to us, and get them emailed to me so I can get them out as quickly as possible so we can have answers for our deliberations. Okay.
I did have one question.
Oh,
Is it okay? It's for Erica on the position in Public Works. Do we already have, like a vehicle planned, since we are adding so many for that FTE, or would another vehicle be needed?
No, the proposed vehicles would cover. I mean, one will need to be replaced. Still, the replacement schedule won't change, but no, there would not be.
Thank you.
You're welcome. I will tell you, there was an original ask for 2 full-time staff members, and that opens up a much broader discussion. And not only did we think we couldn't afford that currently, but again, there's another capital outlay in that, potentially in that area. Not necessarily every person doesn't get a plow truck, but that there would be enough now.
okay. Anything else in budget discussion? Okay. Correspondence. You have everything. So we're back to present to speak. Anybody who has video on who would like to speak, wave your hand, please. Mr. Rupert?
So one of the things I'd like to go back to is talking about the software that we're using in the land use department. I'd like everybody to understand that it's, as Erica suggested, it's not just used for building permits. It's used for zoning applications. It is used for dog licensing this year with the pandemic. It's been used for people to sign up for basketball and things of that nature. And we didn't ask for this purely from a perspective of, trying to make sure that it's covered with building permits. One of the things that's also happened over the course of the last several years is we have replaced dozens and dozens of foundations in the town of Wellington. And this is also a records management. And I can tell you that if we did not have this system, I would be asking for more hours simply because we would need it in order to manage all of those records. And, that is work. We can divide that number by the number of permits, but remember, that is work that we're not seeing revenue from. I would guess if we were collecting revenue, our revenue for the year would probably be almost doubled. So there's a lot of reasons that we asked for that software. And yes, there's increases on an annual basis, but I think every year we have found ways to utilize that system that not only benefit the land use department, but benefit, the town as a whole.
Mr. Rupert, would you, just for the benefit of those who don't know you like me, would you just state who you are and what your position is?
Absolutely. I'm the building official for the town of Wellington.
Thank you. Peter Latinchich, I saw your hand waving.
Yes, thank you. Peter Latinchich, 97 Trask Road. I asked at the first present to speak if we can anticipate returning to in-person meetings for the public hearing on the budget, the town meeting, and referendum. And given tonight's presentations, and the sobering reality of our decline in revenue, flat mill rate, and a potential 2 mil increase, I think the townspeople would very much like to do that. Can you comment on making that happen in the budget schedule?
Well, this is present to speak, so it's kind of limited on how much business we can do here, but I think it was clear from what Erica said in our discussion that everyone's looking at guidance from the governor's office and all of that, and so this will stay a conversation as we move closer to that meeting.
I certainly hope so, and I would hope you'd also consider guidance from our townspeople. Our town meeting form of government predates the state of Connecticut and the governor. And I think there's ample precedent that we should return as quickly as possible to our traditional form of government. Thank you.
Okay, other present to speak. If you are not providing video, you could unmute, call out your name. I think I see all the tiles on one screen here. All right, I'm not seeing any other for present to speak.
Can they unmute themselves?
What's that?
They can unmute
Yes,
themselves?
they can unmute themselves. I have the provision properly selected in the control board here. I just made that up. Did it sound good?
Yeah.
Okay. I have nothing else. I have nothing for good and welfare, unless anyone has anything else.
Move to adjourn.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, all those in favor indicate by saying aye and waving.
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, everybody. Appreciate all the help and continue working through this. Good night.